My name is Shamara Fletcher and I am the Principal Officer for Pentecostal, Charismatic and Multicultural Relations at Churches Together in England. I am also the first and youngest Black Pentecostal female to ever read at the Queen of England's funeral in front of 4.1 billion people. My life is a testament of God's generosity and goodness. But it didn't start there. God's generosity in my life became real and tangible at the age of 18 whilst looking out the windows of my Pentecostal church in Birmingham one Sunday morning. I was deeply compelled to the reality that our generous God was calling me beyond the four walls of the church. The following couple of Sundays, our local evangelist, Evangelist Hamilton, came to speak about his homeless prison ministry, and I instantly committed myself to help at his next food bank the following month. Now, on the day that I said I would go out to feed the homeless, I was faced with a dilemma. Did I stay on the bus and continue my journey with my friends, or would I honour my commitment? Deciding to honour that commitment changed the whole trajectory of my life, and I have seen the generosity of God. As a younger Christian at the time, I was full of zeal and was ready to go out and bring Christ to the streets. However, on my first day at the food bank, I was quickly humbled, as God was already there, and it became clear that I was there to participate in God's mission and not create it. The generosity of God became alive to me in the homeless community. I saw people who didn't know where their next meal would come from, half their sandwich, and give it to their homeless brothers and sisters. I was amazed and somewhat surprised that there were homeless Christians doing mission and sharing the gospel amongst their community. A few years later, I then started a small student movement called Transform, where we'd go out onto the streets on a fortnightly basis and do mission, give out food, pray with our homeless community, and we made it a code of practice to never give food that we as a team would not eat ourselves. After a couple of years of doing this, I said to the team at the time, "This is great, but it's actually only a plaster to a wider issue. We need to go to Parliament and speak to policymakers because the national policy is not filtering to grassroots impact." God heard that meeting, and a year later, I was on an internship program in East London, working half the week on a parliamentary program and the other half of the week with the Church of England on establishing missional communities, one of which was the innovative chaplaincy. We saw 70% engagement with faith-based activity. The school dedicated a whole space to the chaplaincy department, and positive comments from the Department for Education and Ofsted were received. God really showed up. We also led a homeless project called The Open Table, which saw homeless people as well as millionaires, cleaners, bankers from Canary Wharf, and a real mix of civic society gathered around the commonality of a meal. God's generosity shined on the streets of Shadwell as volunteers would generously give their time. His generosity shined through the leadership and priests at St. George in the East, Father Angus Ritchie and Father Richard Springer, who would give their resources to fund homeless outreach. Generosity also shined through friendships and community that would blossom on cold winter nights. We worked with the local council as well as national civic institutions and were nominated to receive £800,000 worth of homeless containers. We saw homeless lives transformed and integrated into society, as well as them coming to faith and becoming ministers in their own right. So during Thy Kingdom Come this year, in a time of scarcity, obscurity, and limited resources, let us never lose the spirit of generosity. Let us never forget to be generous to the least of these, and always remember God's ultimate gift of generosity through the gift of Jesus Christ. Jesus was homeless, a refugee, and on the margins of society. So let us remember that our God, our generous God, calls us to be generous, and especially to the least of these.